Hello everyone. We will continue Lightning Web Component, and in today's session I will be talking about the communication, parent to child communication and child to parent communication. We have discussed parent to child communication, or we can say we saw how it works when we were discussing the API decorator, but today we will see it again. Okay, so let us also open the Lightning Studio. Okay, and first we will do parent to child communication, and then we will do child to parent communication. So we will cover everything on the parent to child communication first. Okay, I hope you are able to see my Lightning Studio screen.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mohan.
Perfect. Okay, do you guys have any question before we begin? Or let's take question at the end. Let's cover the main topic first and then take the question by the end. Okay, so I will create a
Okay.
component P2C communication. Basically, this is parent to child communication. Okay. And let me name it parent to child parent component. Name is not so good. Okay, let me just name it parent component. Okay. I want to expose this. I want to add this on the record page and I want to deploy this. Similar to this, I will create another component, which will be child component. And we will deploy that as well. Okay. I will open both the HTML and JS file of both the component. Let me add the lightning card on it. Lightning card is nothing but just a tag, which will give us a title and card in the front end. I will just name it parent component. Save it. Then go to the child. Let's copy it. Create the child component and name it as child component. Okay. I hope you are able to see this. Okay, now to send or to append child component in the parent component, in the HTML of parent component, I will just have to add the child component. We have seen this happening earlier as well, and I can do it like this. And by this way, if I save this, my child component will be inside the parent component, and I need not to explicitly add this child component when we add the component on the record page. So I will just add the parent on the record page, and because this child component is inside the parent component, it will also be displayed within it. Okay. So this is how we add a child component inside the parent component. Okay. So let us quickly go to the Salesforce screen and try to add this on page. And communication is very important here, guys. They ask a lot of interview question on parent to child and child to parent communication. This is one of the main, or you can say the core feature in LWC. Okay, I will repeat. Let me just add it on the page first. Okay, now you see here parent component. I will just add this parent component on the account record page. I am not adding the child component. I need not to add the child component here. I'm not going to drag it on this screen, but Because child component is already inside the parent component, child component will also be displayed on the page. So this is how you add a child component inside a parent component. Just give me a minute, guys. Sorry, guys, I'm back. So just before the class, I was making coffee, but I forgot that. And when I started smelling coffee burning, then I realized, okay. So this is how we are going to add parent component on the page. And because child component is already inside the parent component, we need not to add it explicitly and just save it. Okay. We have not done any communication so far between parent and child. We have just added child component in the parent component. Okay. Now, in parent component, I am going to create a name field, and I will name it, I am going to, let's say, just create it as a name field, and or even before creating it on parent, let's create a name field on the child component. Okay. Name. Okay. Just the name. Okay. Now, what I want is I want to pass the value of this name property from parent component. Okay. So I am not going to define any value here to this. And what I want is parent component should give data to this name property. Okay. It is already increased, guys. Come on. Is it visible now, Vaibhav? Okay. So what I want is parent component should pass the value to it. But in order to be able to do that, we will have to we will have to import the API decorator, and we will also have to add the @ API in front of the property. Okay. So we will do that. Now parent has to pass data to it. So in the tag where we have added child component, I am going to add the value for it. Okay, let's say I want to pass my name to the child component. Okay, and in the HTML, I want to display it. On the HTML of child component, I want to display the name passed by parent component. So I'll name it as the name passed by parent component is, and here we will have to add the property name. Whatever the value of name will be, that will be displayed on the page. Okay, as simple as it is. And this name will get value from the parent component, and we are passing a static value to our child component from the parent component. So this is what we are doing till now. Okay. Is the WhatsApp open? Not sure. Maybe in my office laptop. Anybody has any doubt about what we did till now?
No, sir.
Perfect. So we have added it on page. Let's refresh it. Now you can see the name passed by parent component is Mohit. Okay, so this is the content of child component, and this is the value. The Mohit value was passed by the parent component in the child component. If we see here again, the HTML of child component, it says that the name passed by parent component is and the value of this property. And in the JS of child component, we have not defined any value to it. So value has been assigned by the parent component. This is the parent component. In the tag where we have defined the child component, we are passing a static value. Every time it loads, it will pass the same value. So what we have done here, we are passing a static value from our parent component to our child component. This is parent to child communication in which we have passed a static value. But what if I do not want to pass a static value? I want to pass it dynamic value. Okay, I don't want to hard code it. So in that case, if I don't want to hard code it, then I can define, let's say, a property here, name.
Sir, if in the child component, when we declare the name property, at that time, if we mention the value of name, then it get overwritten by the parent component.
Yes, 100%. 100% it will be overridden by the, when we get the value from parent component, that value will be overridden. So let's say if I define it as, so if I define a value as, and save it, edit it, and it will overwrite every time we do. Okay, so initially when the page will load, uh, it will pass the value, and whatever you defined on the child component will be overwritten by the value provided by the parent component. Okay, so yes, that will be overridden. Now, what we were doing here is that we were passing the value as a hard-coded value. I don't want to do that. I want to pass a dynamic value. So for that, I'm going to create a name property here, name in parent component. Okay. Or I just write it as name in parent, and I will write it as Shivangi. Or let me write my own name. Not so that confuse everybody. So now what we have done, instead of passing it as a static value, what I'm going to do, I have defined a property in my JS of parent, and we will use that property name. And we'll save it. Let's change it. Otherwise, we will not be able to confirm the page changes on the UI. Okay. Now, this time I'm passing different name from my parent component to child component, and we will see the difference in the UI. Okay. Right, let me go back. Now you will see a different name because we are sending a different name. But this time we are doing it a bit differently. Earlier, we did it by adding it as a static value. Now we are passing the property name. So here what we are doing, we are passing a primitive data type from a parent component to the child component dynamically. Okay, this is not hard coded. Instead, we are passing it as a dynamic primitive value. Okay, so this is also possible. Now, in your real project, it will be like here you have defined it as a static value. So it is more or less similar. Instead of making it static on HTML, now you are making it static in the JavaScript, but static is static. Okay, so this actually is not dynamic. How you will make it dynamic? Let's create a input field here. Lightning input, and let's provide value, name, and we don't need placeholder. Instead, we need on change. Let's create an on change handler. Name change handler. So this is we are adding in the parent component. We are adding an input tag in the parent component, and whatever value we write in the parent component, that name should be passed to the child component. Okay, that is my requirement. Okay. So in order to do that, what we have done, we have added an input field, and then we are just adding a name change handler on the JavaScript file. Okay. So let's copy this. Let's go to this. Let's write down some code on it. This will take event as input, and we will write it. This dot name in parent will be equal to event dot target dot value. We will save it. Okay. Now, whatever value we write on this input field, that value will be passed to the child component, and then in the child component, we will get it. Okay. So here in the child component, let's write it like name in child. Okay. Just so that we will have a different name in parent as well as in the child. Okay. Save it. And then how we are passing, this is the variable name of the child component. So we in the JS we created as a name property. So here we were using name. Now we have changed the name of it to name in child. We will also have to change the syntax here. So it should be name in child. Okay. Every time we get a capital letter, we'll have to add a dash in front of it just to tell the compiler that that is how the name is in the backend. Okay. So let us save this as well. And I think we are good. Let's go to Salesforce UI and see if we are getting input field now or not. Okay. Now we should be able to get the input field because that change has been captured by the page. Perfect. Now Shivangi was the by default name. How? If you see here in the JS of parent, we have given a name Shivangi as a by default value of this name in parent property. So that is why by default it is getting Shivangi. But when we add a value on this input field, that will call the on change handler, and then on change handler will change the value of name in parent. And when we change the value of this property, then that changed property will be passed to the child component and will be assigned to this particular property name in the child components JS. And then that property will be displayed on the child components HTML on this line. Okay. So let us just verify this if that is happening or not. Let us refresh this once again. Now let me try to add my name. And the moment I add my name, this name has been reflected here. So we were able to pass the data from parent component to the child component on the event occurrence on the parent component. Okay. So when you get this question in an interview, you have different way to say that, different options to say that. Although this is a very simple question, but if you are a good candidate, you can explain it properly by telling that there are various options the first thing and most important thing is that we'll have to add the child component in the parent component, and then depending on what need to be passed, if we need to pass the primitive data or non-primitive data, we can pass that based on the property name of it. We can also pass it based on the event occurrence on the parent component as well. Okay, passing data to child on action at parent, that is also possible. And there is one more way which we'll be discussing later on after this. That is also possible when we call the child components method on the parent component. That is also possible. But before that, let us also see if here we are simply passing the name. If we will have to pass the object, if that is possible or not, that is what I want to see now. Okay, so in order to do that, let us create a object in the parent component and then pass that object to the child component. Okay, we will create the same object which we created last time, name obj. Okay. This will have two properties, first name and last name. And let us write it first name, last name. Let's say this time I will be passing. Okay, let us save this. Okay, so on the child component as well, we will have to create the obj property. Okay, so let us create API and call it name obj in child. Okay, and we need not to define any value to it yet, but on the HTML of it, we will have to display it, right? So let's display as a p tag, and let's write the name passed by parent, name object. We are discussing communication, Manjunath. So parent to child and child to parent communication. Currently, we are doing parent to child communication. Different ways we can do. Okay. And currently we are seeing how to pass an object from parent to child. Okay. So name object passed by parent is, and here you can say the value of name obj dot, and then we have two properties, right? First name and last name. So we're not much concerned about formatting for now. Our aim is to get the value. Okay. Now in the parent component JS, we have created is this name obj property object. Let's pass the value in it. How do we pass the value in it? By on the child component tag, on the tag where we are adding the child component, we'll go to that tag, and then similar to how we are passing the value to a primitive data type, we will pass the value to object as well. Okay, so what is the name? Name obj in child component. So let's use that. Name obj in child. Yeah, I think that is the name. And then value will be the value we have defined or the property name we have defined in the JS file. Let us just save this. So earlier we passed a simple name, which was just a simple string. Now we are passing an object which has two properties in it, first name and last name. And then we are trying to get value in the name obj in child property, the property value passed by the name obj, and then we will be displaying it on the HTML. Okay, that is what we want to do. Okay, let's just save this. Let's just save this and go to the Salesforce screen. Let us try to refresh it. With the page. Let us save this. My mouse got disconnected. All right, so now you can see that name object passed by parent is, and we are able to see the value what we passed by the parent component. So this is how we can pass the object from parent to child. Now, last thing in this parent to child communication is how can we call the method of a child component in the parent components JS and then pass the value to it. So currently what we are doing, if I show you what we are doing here, and let me just minimize it a bit. In the parent component, we have added the child component on line number 4, right? And then when we'll have to pass the data, we are using the property name which we have defined in the child component, and we are passing the property value of a property which we have defined in the parent component. So essentially, we are using the HTML of parent component to pass data to child component. But in the next step, we will see how without using HTML, like without using this way, how we can still change the value of the property or pass the value of the property in the child component. That is what we are going to check now. Okay, so let's do that. That is known as passing data to child component by calling a method of child, by calling a child method on the parent. Okay, so for that also we'll have to do some groundwork. Let us create an input field on the parent component. Let us create an input field. This time we are not going to pass the name, we are going to pass the company name. So let's say we are creating an input field. Okay. And let's change label of it and call it company name. Okay. Let's remove the placeholder. We don't need placeholder. Instead, we need the on change handler. So we will add an on change handler, and this time we'll call it company company name change handler. Okay. So we created an input field named company name. Okay. And we are creating a event handler, company change handler there. Okay. That's it. That's what we are doing in this step. Let's save this, copy the name of company, name change handler, and write a code in it. Okay, let us also create a property called company name. Okay, let us save this. Now we will have to pass the value of this company name to the child component. Okay, and here we cannot do it like how we did earlier. So we cannot do it like adding company name here in the HTML. We will have to access the method of child component. Okay, so we will see how we do that. Okay, now in the child component also, we will have to do some groundwork. Okay, we have to create a variable or property name and we name it as company name. Okay, and there is, let's say, a method company name change handler. Okay, and let us also add on child just to avoid the confusion. Okay, this is the method which I want to access in the parent component and want to pass the data from parent component to the child component method. The only prerequisite here is that we will also have to add the API decorator in front of it. Okay, and we will talk about what we are going to put in it later on. Let's go back to the JS of parent component and this event handler company name change handler. Let us also add on parent just to avoid confusion. Let us change the name in HTML as well. This will take event as an input. Okay, so we will do that. Now, first, let us assign the value in the company name field, right? So this will be event dot target dot value. Okay, and this is how we are going to assign the value to the company name field. Now we will have to get the child component here. So how we are going to get the child component? We will create a const and we will name it as child component. Okay, and then you will have to write this dot, let me just write down query selector. So you will have to write this dot template dot query selector, and then here inside it in a single quote, you will have to add the name of your child component. The same way you add the name in the HTML, just copy that name and you can add it right here. This is how you are going to get the child component. Because this child component is already there in the HTML of your parent component, say you can get it by the query selector. Same way you can get other tags as well. So if you want to get all the input tags, you can get the input tag by the tag name. Okay. By using this dot template dot query selector, you are querying the HTML of it and you are specifically querying this particular tag. So whatever we have in this particular tag, you will be able to access that. Okay. If you will not add this line, or let's say if you have not added the child component in your parent component, then this will throw you error because that tag is not available in the HTML file of it. This can only refer to the HTML file. Okay. Once you got the child component, then you can get the method of this child component as well. Okay. So then you will get the child component, the child component dot, and then here you can get the method you have written in the child component, which is this. Then you can get this method as well. Okay. And once you get this method, then you can pass the value of company name. So now you are passing the value to the method of a child component, and then this value can be used in the child component. Okay. So in a way, you are manipulating the value which will be used in the child component. Okay. So I think we are done with the groundwork on the parent component. Let's go to the child component, and here this will get the value. Okay. So here this can get the value from the parent component. Let's say it is company name. Okay. And then inside this, you can say this dot company name equals to the company name passed by the parent component. Okay. I think that should be all. You can also console this, console.log. We are using const variable because this is a tag, which will obviously be a constant. This dot company name passed by parent, let us write that. Company name passed by parent, and then you can query it. Okay. Save it. And we also want to display this on page, right? What will be the use of getting it if you are not displaying it on the page? So let's do that. Let's display it as a p tag. And here we can write company name passed by parent, and here you can write down the value of the or the property name here, because and just save it. All right, I think we are done with all the groundwork for this. Let's go back to the Salesforce screen. Let's edit the page. Okay. Now, let's go back to the page and let's add the company name in the still we did not get. Let's add the company name in the input tag and then see if that is working or not. Okay, so we have got the input tag. Let us try to write the value of it. Chandan, which company you are working on? Let me write Infosys. And we are able to get the value in the file component as well. So in this approach, okay, in this approach, what we did not pass the value with the traditional way. we were using earlier by adding the components property name and then passing the value. Instead, in the parent component, we are calling the child component, and the reason why it is const because this is a tag. Obviously, you will not be changing the tag name, right? This is obviously be static. You are not going to rename your child component or change the name of your child component. Okay, so this tag is not, this tag is to get the child component, okay, which obviously will not change. Okay, so that is why, and for that matter of fact, if you are getting any tag from the HTML, always make it constant because you are not going to change that. If you'll have to get the another tag, then you will use another const. Okay, that HTML tags are static. They are not properties. They are not variables. Okay. So in this approach, what we did, we got the child component in the JavaScript, and then we get access to the method written inside the child components JavaScript, and then passed the value to the child components JavaScript method. And then in the child component, we have used the passed value and manipulated the existing property based on it, and then displayed it on the HTML. Okay, so this approach is very important. When you get this question in your interview, it is very important that you mention this. You inform all the possible ways how you pass primitive data, how you pass non-primitive data, how you can pass the static data directly just by assigning value in the HTML, do not even touching JavaScript. And then finally, you can also pass the data to child component when some action happens on the parent component. And then at the end, we can call the child components method and then pass the value. So there are different ways to do parent to child communication. This is very simple, but if you explain it properly, this gives you good result. Like you will get maximum marks out of that question. Now compare to parent to child to parent communication is bit complicated because parent to child was very straightforward, whereas child to parent has couple of tricks. It is not that straightforward. We'll have to write custom event, or we will have to use the event propagation. So that is something which I want to cover in a single session. I don't think I'll be able to do that today because that at least will take another session. So that we will do tomorrow, and then we'll see how it goes. But that is how parent to child communication work. Now let us open the floor for questions, and